What's up, guys? Dr. Detweiler here from High Performance Group. Not doing this live on the road as usual, um, like usual this time. A lot of stuff was going on this morning here. Actually, still had a pretty busy New Year's Eve day, or sorry, New Year's Eve day this morning. So stuff got a little bit backed up, and a couple patients, a couple different athletes we're working with right now that have some specific things going on. It took a little longer than I thought. So figured just come home, grab my thoughts a bit, and do the live from home, which is not bad. So I hope you guys are all getting ready for a great New Year's Eve here and ready for the start of the next year. So like I said, I just kind of want to run over some really simple but honestly really important tips when it comes to kind of wrapping up some of this nutrition talks we're having here with basically shopping and how to read labels. Those are two big things that, like, as we've gone through all the shit that I've talked about over the last 3, 4, I think maybe even 5 weeks, I'm not quite sure. Those are all good information, but then, oftentimes it's the application of that information that makes the biggest difference. So it's great to talk about all the things you should be doing, should be eating, and stuff. But then when it comes down to it, when you're in the grocery store making those decisions and deciding what it is you want to put in your grocery basket, oftentimes you don't have the right information. Those little simple tips as to how to execute. You may not be getting the best out of your nutrition planning, or out of making those lifestyle changes that you're looking to make. So those are going to be the big things we're going to look at today. Should be pretty quick and easy, but we're really going to break down the nutrition label and just make sure you guys understand what you're seeing when you're reading that label. And then just give a couple different, kind of running over that first very basic nutrition talk that we had, where we detailed what to look for in a protein, a carb, and a fat. Just make sure you guys are are understanding that again, as again, once it gets down to actually buying the product. That's where it makes a difference. If it makes it into your house, and you're most likely going to have to end up eating it. And if you made the wrong decision at the grocery store, that's where it all starts. And then finally, we'll look at different seasonings and condiments and things that you can actually add some taste to your food. Again, this is supposed to be a lifestyle change, not trying to move through this like you're you're trying to I don't know, starve yourself or eat completely bland food. So we'll start with the basics on the nutrition label. So I actually have a sample label printed out we're going to take a look at. But the basics come down to the nutrition label is going to be broken up into three different areas, and then a list of ingredients. So we're going to take a look at that nutrition label and kind of work through each area and tell you what to look for, what to look out for, and then some different troubleshooting tips as far as when it comes to marketing, or it comes to people manipulating the way that food labels are actually supposed to be displayed, or some of the rules around it. You can see some people, some companies, sorry, not people, you can see some companies actually manipulate that to kind of confuse you. So we will take a look at that right now. So here is basically the anatomy of the nutrition label, right? So like we said, we're basically broken down into three different spots. So we have the very top, and then this big middle part, and then, like I said, the lower part, and then our ingredients. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the nutrition label. So this is, I don't even know what this is for, but obviously it has all carbs, fats, and proteins in it. So we'll break those down. So again, looking at this label, the very top is going to show you your serving size and calories in one serving. Okay, so we're talking about this guy right here, serving size and calories per serving. So basically, those are two important things to look at. If you are in a situation where you start actually measuring out your macros, that's very helpful to be able to get an idea of what you're actually consuming. But so basically, you're going to see your serving size. Here's a half a cup, or oftentimes it's in grams. So sometimes you have to do a lot of converting, which does suck. But again, it's just kind of part of the process. And then again, you have underneath that, you have calories per serving, and then calories from fat. So that's your very basic start. And again, kind of the concept here is just getting you an idea of Honestly, the biggest thing is pay attention to the serving size. We'll go over why later, but the biggest thing you're going to notice here is it's easy to look at calories and go, oh, okay, it's got 230 calories. But the big thing is going to be making sure that this guy is paid attention to, and we'll talk about that why in a little bit. So the second part here is kind of the meat of the nutrition label. So this is where you're going to have all three of the macros that we've been consistently talking about. They're going to be all together in this nutrition label, and they're going to be broken down in how much of the calorie content we saw up here is actually seen in each individual macro, as well as we have some sodium and cholesterol, but not really going to worry too much about that. And then basically what we're going to have is, like I said, that breakdown of how many grams are going to be in each serving. So just for a quick conversion, if you're trying to find out how many calories are coming from each of these macros, you multiply the amount of grams of fat by 9, and then the amount of grams of carbohydrates and protein by 4. So when it has 7 grams of fat, what that's really saying is, let's see if my math is good, 63 grams, or 63 calories ish of those calories are coming from fat. Now again, look how you start seeing how that doesn't match up here. Oftentimes, again, it's because there's something being left out in here, which my guess is it's something with the trans fats in this one that's allowing them to say it has 0 trans fats, but in reality it may have more than you think. So again, there are some things we're going to start looking at here in the label that can get really tricky that people try to kind of mess you up with. So that's why if you multiply this by 9 and start going, wait a minute, it says there's more calories from fat in there, start suspecting that you're getting some hidden calories or just some hidden content in there. Again, I don't want to make this complicated, but just know there's a few ways they can mess with that. So again, then we have carbohydrates and protein. So the biggest thing we're looking at those situations is, so this where it breaks down everything in saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and trans fats are like, that's like a unicorn. So usually you're going to see your saturated fats and your trans fats. You're not going to ever see the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, and unfortunately it'd be nice to know those because actually those are actually good fats. So if you look at like a good example, like a jar of peanut butter, they'll typically list saturated fats and trans fats and none of the polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats. And that's actually the vast majority of what a peanut butter is. So again, those are things that has those are good things to look out for, and we're going to get to it later, but definitely the trans fats are ones we want to stay away from. So when it comes to carbohydrates, again, we have carbohydrates, and then that gets broken down into dietary fiber, sugar, and then possibly even sugar alcohols. So I'm not going to overcomplicate this in the label reading, but basically the biggest thing to note is if you are ever trying to look at the carbohydrate content, and if you are someone who is trying to be technical about things and say, oh, well, how many actual usable carbs are in this serving? Basically, the only thing you subtract ever is dietary fiber, and even then, for the sake of what we're doing, this is not what we're really worried about. So if you want to get technical with that, you can do that. But again, like sugar alcohols and the sugar, as you see it's broken down, those are still relative to the total carbohydrate count. And again, typically, I think sometimes they have like other carbohydrates, or there may be another term that gets thrown in there. But again, the biggest thing is we're looking at the total carbohydrates there. Protein is usually just protein. It's the last one there. That's pretty self-explanatory. But again, that's kind of how you can see how the label starts to be broken down a little bit. And a lot of times, just being able to flip the package over, we'll branch out on this once we get to actual different foods that you're looking at. Like for example, if you're looking to find, your protein source for your meals or your carb source for your meals, that's when we start getting into this where the label reading is important. Right now, I just want you guys to understand the basic anatomy of that nutrition label. So after that, we then see how there's this third section on the bottom. So, top, middle, bottom section. This is often where manufacturers or food companies are going to put extra ingredients or not ingredients, but nutrients and things that they may want to highlight as possibly being nutritional. Now, whether or not they're actually nutritional is sometimes a little bit sketchy. But like here, we have vitamin A and vitamin C listed right there. You get into something that's maybe got a lot more of these micronutrients. They're going to be all listed there as well. And then finally, again, we got on the bottom here, we have ingredients. Okay, and so for ingredients, a good rule of thumb is either A, as we look here. So just based on what we're looking at here, there's got to be some sort of chocolate flavored chip or graham cracker or something like that. That's probably what this product is. But basically, like, let's say you go and you buy something that's claimed to be like a protein or a carbohydrate source, and it's got like 25 different things on here, and 10 of them you can't even pronounce. It's probably a good sign that you don't need to be putting this in your body. Okay, so we're trying to look to find natural ingredients. We're trying to find the smallest amount of ingredients as possible. And you kind of see this is a good example because it's got a mix of a bunch of stuff here. So you can see like, okay, whole grain rolled wheat, that's not bad, and then we start getting into like soy protein isolate, hydrolyzed collagen, some calcium caseinate. I mean, we start getting into some things like, I don't know what that quite is, polydextrose. Those will start kind of going like, I don't know if I like this or not. But in all honesty, cocoa butter, water, cocoa powder, coconut oil, natural coconut oil. I mean, whole grain rolled oats, almonds, like. So you can kind of see how even just running through there, you can probably pick out the things that go, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, and there's other stuff that goes, I don't know what the hell that is. And that's kind of the point. So without over complicating it and finding out what each and every one of these ingredients are, the smallest amount of ingredients, the better. And then for example, if you're going to get a cheat meal, right, and you have to get ice cream or something, you look at the ice cream list and it's got 8 ingredients. That's a pretty dang good product. If you look at the product and it's got 25 ingredients in it and half of them are things you don't understand, even if it's a cheat meal and you're trying to like do whatever you want, maybe it's still a good idea not to throw a bunch of chemicals in your body. So that's your basics on the anatomy of a nutrition label. If you have any questions about that, feel free to list them here in the comments, or definitely DM me after this, after you see this, and be happy to answer any of those questions. As we continue forward, those are kind of a quick breakdown of that nutrition label. So here's some things we want to make sure we're paying close attention to. So I already mentioned this before, looking at the serving size, and this gets important when you get down to, actually I'm going to flip it back over again. Let's use this example because this happens a lot in seasonings, even though we're going to get to it later. So let's say you're grabbing a seasoning, right? Let's say you're like, oh man, I want to get a barbecue seasoning. Like, I think that'd be really good on some chicken. Chicken's a good protein, so I want to season it up, and I want to get some barbecue seasoning. Well, you go in and you start looking at the middle section, right? And you go, okay, this isn't too bad. There's no fat in it. Let's say there's I don't even really care about sodium. I'm not really that big of a deal on that. But let's say you see like, oh man, there's only 1 gram of carbohydrates, or it says less than 1 gram. You go, man, that looks like it pretty much fits the bill. We'll talk about this here in a bit, but you want no calories in your seasonings, right? Or very, very low calories in your seasonings, because it's just added shit. So let's say you get into that and you go, okay, so this looks like I found a good seasoning, I'm going to use it. And what you might mistake is you might go up here, and instead of like a tablespoon or a teaspoon, you might have like this serving size be a 1/4 teaspoon, and your servings per container is like 200 and some. Okay, so now all of a sudden, this barbecue seasoning that you thought was fantastic and badass, it has, let's say it's less than 1. Okay, so when they can put less than 1 on any of these, especially, and they do it a lot for sugars, but when they can put less than 1, or like a trans fat, what that means is, I believe it's less than 0.5 grams, they can claim that there's none in there, or they can say less than 1, and maybe if it's like underneath 1 but not above 0.5. I don't know the exacts from it, but there's some workarounds that people can do to manipulate this label and make it look pretty awesome. And for seasonings, that's a huge one, where they'll put like a quarter tablespoon, or a quarter teaspoon as a serving size, and there's like 200, you know, there's like 200 freaking servings in something like this big, right? This is actually a Chinese 5-spice, which I'm pretty excited to try. 0 calories and all that shit. But so they'll do that, and so when it says, okay, less than 1 gram, what actually ends up happening is you multiply, let's say half. Let's just assume it's half a gram of carbohydrates, right? And it's definitely sugar. You know, you go through the list of the ingredients, you go, oh, there's sugar. Well, then clearly there has to be a carbohydrate listed here, right? So you go through that and you multiply less than 1 by like 230, you got 130 grams of carbs that's likely in this seasoning. And let's say you use a fourth of that or a half of that on your chicken because you cook like 5 pounds of chicken. You just threw in an extra 130 grams of carbs and 130 grams of sugar into your diet. So this is where this stuff gets really interesting. It's definitely good for you to pay attention to this and really start questioning some things when you see them in there and it looks a little bit too good to be true. They have to list it, so you can go through and you can take a look and just kind of double check everything to make sure it sounds right. And that's kind of what all it really comes down to, is being a little bit more wise on what you're looking for and then just being able to do so. So now we can go to the last tip on what to look out when you are doing that label reading. The other thing is, like, a lot of companies, especially cereal companies, when all the BS science came out about fat being absolutely god awful for you and causing heart disease, every cereal company in existence went to the fact that because they're all carbs, that they're heart healthy. You know, so when you see something that's on the label, especially, and again, like, if it's a natural food, it's usually not gonna have a whole lot of labels or claims to be good. So it's definitely something you got to watch out for. So something that claims to be heart healthy, a lot of times it's, you know, stuff like that is an advertising ploy. It may or may not actually be true, and when it isn't true, it's often because it's based on outdated science, or it's crappy science. So always be kind of weary about claims when you're in a grocery store, especially when they're like, okay, it's a boxed good, or, you know, we start getting into where you should be getting your groceries anyways. Like, a package of broccoli is not going to have heart healthy written on it, even though it is. You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things where don't necessarily get too amped up in seeing something that says, like, oh, it's a well-balanced, you know, breakfast, part of a well-balanced breakfast. Like, I'm pretty sure at one point, like, Pop-Tarts and shit were basically advertising that on TV. Like, there's a kind of a wild west when it comes to what you can claim your product is able to do. And that's just definitely something that it may seem like common sense to some of you, but for others, it may not be something you have considered. So it's always good to run over that. So now we kind of gone over the nutrition label. Let me see what time it is here. I definitely apologize. I literally got to jump off this phone call and into a phone call here in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to try to wrap this up. But basically, when you're doing your grocery shopping, in worst case, I can just jump on afterwards and do the rest of it if I run short. But basically, when you're doing your grocery shopping, then that comes into, now you can utilize that label to figure out what meets your needs and, you know, what meets a good, well-rounded nutrition plan. So for proteins, we try to limit the amount of fat to less than 20% of the protein in the serving. So to make that a little more simpler, basically is, you know, most proteins you should be buying are going to have about 20 grams of protein or 25 grams of protein in them. So your chicken, your beef, you know, pork, anything like that. If you look at, you know, the serving size, typically like 3 or 4 ounces ish. You know, 2 to 4 ounces are pretty typical, and then that's gonna be about 20 to 25 grams of protein. So you want that fat content to be 20% of that protein content. So about 4 or 5 grams of fat in that protein. So that's usually a good one. So I'll just go to the nutrition. Nice to have this out here. So basically what I'm saying is your fat up here is going to be something in the realm of, you know, 5 or below, when this is then going to be like 20 or above. Okay, that's a good balance. That means you're getting a lean fat source that's going to be pretty quality. And then, of course, the other thing is make sure there's no carbohydrates in there. That's typically mostly for like deli meats or like a ham. So if you go and have like a big, Christmas ham or whatever, a lot of times there's going to be some added sugars in them. But just pay attention that, like, again, the whole point is if we're going to buy a protein source, I want just protein. And the more protein I can have, just protein, the more consistent you're going to be in the amount of calories you're getting into your body, and there won't be what we call like dead calories or unaccounted for calories when you go, okay, this is my my palm size of protein, right? So the actual palm of my hand, not my fingers. When you go to your palm size of protein, it's not going to be also having a bunch of fat and a bunch of carbs in it as well. So then from there, for fat, when we're looking for fat sources, let's back up. So types of protein you're going to be looking for. Another rule of thumb is if it's not an actual cut of meat, then or it's processed, then you probably don't even need to be asking the question if it's good. So another example would be like fish sticks are not a protein source. They're going to be they're not a protein source. They're probably more carbohydrates and fat than anything. So those are a good example of what you need to be looking out for when you're doing grocery shopping. And then, so other than that, like another example is, okay, bacon's not an acceptable protein source. It's definitely a fat. You look at a package of bacon, there's gonna have much more fat in it than is protein. So again, based on those rules we talked about before, that's not what we're trying to do. Definitely, Dave, that was what I was doing all freaking morning. I don't know, man. I think we definitely could have had a live going on with what was going on with Joe over the weekend. Holy shit. He was still a little sore from that shit. I appreciate it though. Fats are the next one that we got going on here. So fats is pretty simple. Just limit it to nuts and nut butters and non-vegetable oils. For example, like avocado oil is good, olive oil, stuff like that. What we shouldn't be looking at is any kind of hydrogenated like corn oil or any bullshit vegetable oils like that. That's no bueno. That's your trans fats. So carbs, fats, and protein. So carbs is the last one. Carbs, we're trying to do the same thing as we did before. We're limiting that again to a carb source. So potatoes, breads, some pastas, rice. Just again, the thing we're looking for is we're trying to limit anything having excessive amounts of fat. So if we go to a cracker, right, and it's got freaking 5 grams of fat in it for 20 grams of carbohydrates, then we're bumping a lot of calories in there that if we're not trying to gain a shit ton of weight, then that's not necessarily fitting our needs if we're looking at this from just a basic nutrition standpoint. So that's kind of where we go with the carbs, fats, and proteins. So the last part that I think is going to be really important, and I probably got to get on this conference call, but the last part I think that's really important is going to be like seasonings and what you put on your food to actually make it taste good. That's probably the biggest thing that we want to pay attention to, or at least cover, because I think I did a bad job of not covering that before. So the when you're looking at condiments, again, the same thing applies. Like if it is not a carb, a fat, or a protein. So we want to limit all the calories we can on that, and not from the sense of like calories are bad and like all this evil stuff, but when we're trying to like be consistent in our nutrition, we don't want to be flip-flopping back between like, oh, I ate a salad today and I had all this stuff nailed down as far as what carbs I'm putting in it, maybe you had some nuts in it or something like that, and then I had to make it taste good, so I threw in like a shit ton of ranch, which most ranch is somewhere between like 14 or 17 grams of fat in one serving, and I had like 4 servings of that worth. Like, okay, well then what was the freaking point? So condiments, we want to be 0 calorie. Or very, very few calories. So like, especially with dressings, there are some like yogurt based, I guess, dressings that once in a while it's definitely better than dropping a shit ton of ranch in there. But basically that's kind of the gist of it. So when you're looking at those condiments, like a seasoning salt, garlic salt, any kind of spices or herbs, again, as long as pay attention to the labels on these. And make sure that that's not in there as far as some hidden calories you may not be thinking about. So that's kind of the things you're looking at for like seasonings on your meats or on stuff like that. Marinades or condiments, like I have a whole list of things that I use actually for like different seasonings and salts and marinades or condiments. So if you want a bigger list of these, like just DM me or send me a message or let me know here. Send me your email, and I'll send you out that list of ingredients or of stuff that I use to season with or that I use to use as condiments. But the big ones are stuff like your Frank's Red Hot sauce or buffalo sauce. You have mustard. There are actually some really low sugar, low calorie versions of ketchup and barbecue sauce, but you got again just make sure you're paying attention to what you're putting into you. Like I think Heinz makes one that's like super reduced sugar where it's like 1 tablespoon it's like got like 1 gram of sugar in it. So at that point, like as long as you're not dumping, ketchup all over your shit, like that's pretty good way to if you've got to keep compliance. That's a pretty good way to make a sacrifice of like maybe I'm getting a little bit extra calories in here, or maybe I can't attribute to this that much, but I'm limiting how much it can make a difference on me. I'm trying to think of what else here on the top of my head. Actually, I just got some shit that I'm excited to try out because honestly, some of this is just try shit out, right? I mean, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Margaret. You put ketchup on everything. The other part of this is like when you know what to look for, it's kind of cool. You can try out different seasonings you may not have ever done before. So I just bought this shit, which I'm excited to try out. It's chili garlic sauce, but again, when I look at the back of it, there is literally nothing in here that is gonna fuck with me. So nothing in here is, let's see, chili, salt, garlic, distilled vinegar, potassium sorbate, and sodium bisulfate as preservatives. I'm good to go. So no calories. I'm gonna try it out. Yes, let me chug this. Oh my god. So, anyways, oh shit. No, never mind. I'm reading that now. Whatever, guys. Anyways, so those are all good things. You can always find ways once there's constraints and the